Looks like we are live. So YouTube live streaming seems to be pretty buggy. I have to go live like 5 times before I can go really live. Anyways, so yeah, welcome to the second episode where we are building our Let's Teach application. I'll share my screen. Ooh. We go back to this project and yeah, things are exactly how we left it the last time. Um, so the main thing that we have to do now is obviously discuss the app itself, right? So let's spend some time. So first of all, this app is the app that we're going to build is kind of like the first version of this Uber app idea that I have, and some of that is documented in this thing called Net Protocol. I'll probably add it to the description. So this is a kind of like this Let's Teach is going to be part of this protocol, right? Like protocol in the way that like RSS is a protocol, right? It's kind of like a standard that many sites can follow, and obviously this is a some new feature has been added to my site. Um, there are a bunch of things to worry about, and in this protocol we define a bunch of concepts or ideas. So there's a board, right? That highest level board is whoever decides what you should learn, kind of like, for example, if you're learning fastn, right? So fastn is a programming language that we have designed, and you know, so the board who will decide what does it mean to learn fastn, right, is us, right? So fastn.com is the project that we have, and in that case the board would be fastn. In case traditionally board of education, like in India we have school boards like CBSE, Central Board of Secondary Education, which decides what most schools, the central board schools, teach. So anyway, so the board can be either a real entity, like a actual real board, or it can be a whoever. And then we have syllabus. So every board will be composed of. We saw that a bunch of these ideas of who can be a board, but then we have the syllabus, like you know 10 standard mathematics is the syllabus that CBSE has, or there's an introduction to MongoDB. In this case, we are using MongoDB, Mongo University, which is the uh, company behind well, the training arm of MongoDB company. So they decide when you say, okay, I'm a Mongo base beginner or a Mongo advanced or a certified Mongo whatever, Mongo decides what all you need to know, right? So let's say that's a syllabus, right? The Mongo beginner or whatever, right? So introduction to Mongo. These are all different syllabus. A syllabus will typically be composed of concepts like what all you need to know to say that you Mongo basics, for example. So like in case of 10 stand or some math standard I picked, there was this representation of natural number, integer on number line, non-recurring, non-terminating decimals existent. So these are different concepts that you need to know to qualify. Let's say I think this is from the sixth standard maths. I don't remember where I pick it from, but these are the concepts. Now the um, concepts themselves can have dependencies on other concepts. So concepts dependencies makes for a graph of concepts. Ideally, it should not have cycles, so it should be thought of as a DAG, directed acyclic graph. Right? It is directed because before you learn a concept, you have to learn another concept. So there is a direction before and after, and therefore, and acyclic means that you can't. Otherwise, you'll never be able to learn something. Maybe learning is recursive or cyclic. Maybe acyclic next is not really a necessary thing. We don't really care too much about it. So, anyways, So the most interesting thing is the concept. Concept is a atomic unit of what you're learning, and content is what you are learning. What is the material that you're using to learn that concept? So, for example, right now you're learning how to build apps in what is called fastn, and the content that you're using is this YouTube stream, right? So the content is basically any web page from the perspective of EdNet protocol. All these things that I mentioned, board and syllabus and concept and content, classroom and X-ray, everything that till classroom are all web pages. So because we are living in a digital world where web is the kind of the main thing. So so we are going to learn. Where did we learn this concept from, right? So that is the content. So you might have learned the concept called representation of national number from a YouTube video, or maybe you learned it from a book or from a website. So that makes for a content, and obviously we are hoping there's a lot of content for every concept. So, for example, for the same concept, you can have usually universities or boards will have a like a textbook for that particular board, which will teach, which will be the content for that particular concept that the university needs you to know. But we are hoping ki other people can also create content. And if you create a blog post where you're teaching some concept, right? That as of now, there's no way to really mention what are you teaching, right? So you can come up with these things on your own, right? You'll just say, oh, I'm teaching you, let's say, decorators in Python, right? So you're learning Python language, and Python language has a concept called decorators. So you can say I'm learning decorator, but are you really teaching full decorator? Is like, does that include double decorator, and like is so Python.org, which is a board for deciding Python stuff, should be the, how do I say, the they should define what is decorator, or they might define decorator beginner or decorator advanced or whatever, right? So they are the ones who are kind of deciding these things. And whenever you write a content, ideally you should link to that. That's our idea, that you will link from the concept. So, sorry, content page. So, if you've written a blog post about teaching decorators in Python, you will link. You'll not just have a word like a this thing, just text. It will be an actual link to the concept. The concept would be owned by the page for concept would be owned by the board, right? So the board will, let's say in case of python.org/decorators, right? So python.org will own what does it mean to know concept, and so you can link to that. And obviously when everything is in place, let's say if you've written a blog post about decorators and you've done a linking, forward linking from your content to the concept, right? uh, Search engines, or maybe you can go to concept page, right? Go to python.org/, let's say, decorators, and submit your content to that concept, so that, and maybe you can even classify that you're teaching decorators in Python in English, or in a humorous style or whatever, right? You can choose whatever video, audio, which medium you're using. All of those information you can submit on the pattern.org/decorators, for example, right? So, and anyone else who wants to learn, let's say if you have a dependency key, you cannot learn what are decorators in Python unless you have already learned what is called functions in Python, right? So obviously, if you are trying to learn decorators in Python, you will first, it will show you, right? Hey, before you can learn decorators in Python, you have to learn this thing called functions in Python, and so forth, right? So when you click on that link, it will take you to the page where you will see all the content that python.org/function has, right? Which basically teaches you about functions. So from any blog post or any video which teaches decorators, you can go to the concept page and you can find the dependency, and then you can find the corresponding all the content for that dependency, right? So this is the key idea. So the next concept is the classroom. Classroom is what we are building at the very large, high level. So we are going to create a page. So how does classroom work, right? If you want to teach someone Python, let's say you decide my team, I'm a I'm a programmer or a senior programmer in some company, and I want to teach Python to my team. Now, and that's basically the key thing, right? If you want to do that, you typically would pick a book on Python, or maybe you'll go through some course on Coursera or any of those, resources that you have. And that is apologies for this, really hungry. That is a problem, right? Because if you buy a book on Python, it will teach you a lot of concepts. It might teach you, let's say, multi-threading. It might teach you how to write a server in Python, and so forth. Now you may decide, okay, this team that I'm going to teach this Python, they may not need to know all of that. So, and then the book might not contain everything. For example, you're going to use Python along with let's say Django. So the book for Python you found doesn't have any mention of Django for all you know, right? Like, so that becomes a very tricky situation for you to now go and find multiple books, right? You might, and if you're learning Django and you're really going to use PostgreSQL, now Django, the book on Django may not teach you PostgreSQL to the detail that you need your team to learn, right? So you will go to the find a book for PostgreSQL, but again, PostgreSQL book might be pretty huge, right? You might say, okay, fuck, this is teaching you too much. So your team, you either give them three books, which is pretty big torture because one obviously will be very wasteful. So if they end up learning everything, I mean, there's no problem in learning, but obviously you are living a real practical life where there are 24 hours in a day, and you want that project to be delivered on time or whatever, right? Whatever your goal was to you're learning Python to achieve some goal, and let's say you gave them three books and they take 2 months learning all of that, it might not be optimal. It's not efficient and so forth, right? So you need to be efficient. In order to be efficient, we envisage that you as a team leader will create a classroom, right? And you will kind of become like sort of like a board, but you will pick from the Python. So Python has a beginner Python and advanced Pythons board. We're talking about a future in which this is all real, like where, I mean, the EdNet protocol exists and Python has adopted it. And in the beginning, Python may not adopt it, which is fine because you can totally create a your own site for Python and start doing things. And tomorrow, and we are designing this whole thing in such a way that tomorrow when Python really chooses to become part of this, all the URLs that are linking to this can slowly start moving back to that Python because they are more authoritative, right? So anyways, so you, because if you already know what all concepts you want to include your new class, and that would be your domain knowledge, right? You know, why are you learning Python? No one knows, right? Python team doesn't know why are you learning Python. The book authors of Python do not know. Only you know. Now, why are you teaching Python to your team or your whoever you're teaching it to, right? So you will figure out which all do they really need to know the decorator. For all you know, they may not, right? Decorator is also a kind of like an advanced topic, and they might just need to know basics of how do I say, or maybe they just need to know how to use the decorator, but they don't need to know how to create a decorator, right? So so using decorators, so there might not be any page called concept called decorators because that becomes like a meta concept which teaches you multiple things. Does it mean using, or because the one of the most important thing for concepts is that concepts should be as atomic as possible. So you shouldn't create a concept which ends up being almost like a book. Uh, So it should be all broken down into smallest units. Anyways, so we're looking at the concept, and you decided which all concept you need to teach. You want to teach in this particular to this particular audience. So for that particular audience, you create a classroom, and um, when you are creating the classroom, you will decide what all content you are going to cover. Sorry, concepts you are going to cover in that particular class. Which class would be, and so you list down the concepts, and then you'll have to go through the concept URL for each of the concept you want to teach, and find out the content that you want people to learn, because like learn from. So let's say decorators, how to use decorator, right? There might be hundreds of YouTube videos that might have explained, hundreds of blog posts, there might be, whatever. So which um, content, right? Because you're going for a certain style, you might create your own content, that also is possible. But obviously there are plenty of material hopefully available. As of now, nothing is EdNet protocol available, so we are looking at a future world where EdNet protocol kind of becomes like a thing, and then hopefully people have tagged all of their content with the concept and EdNet URLs, etc. So so that's what you're doing. You're creating classrooms, and classroom basically contains a list of concepts, right? And for each concept, you have mentioned the URL of the content. So in order to implement this properly, we need some sort of also standardized content format, like in what language or in what way the content has been written, because you're talking about the classroom would be like how do I say, a web page, right? And so if you see, for example, let's go to fastn.com slash, let's say, let me go to fastn.com. Um, keep the site down. So, like for example, this is a book we are writing. So this is roughly how the classroom would look like, right? So this is one classroom, hypothetically. We actually, that's the goal we are working towards. So we will be using Let's Teach app, and this fastn.com slash book would be a Let's Teach app powered. So currently this doesn't have any backend functionality, and that's what we are going to add. So what it will have is, this is the name of the classroom, and obviously each of them is a, so you organize your table of content, which all concepts you want to teach. So for example, Hawaii or fast and fifth try, so these are the content we have decided that we want to teach in this particular book that I and Deepthi, my good friend, we are writing this. So and each of them is like a content, right? And the beautiful thing, or whatever, I hope you notice that, like, we keep this, the table of content structure. It's not like this is link which will take you to a foreign site, right? If you do that, then you will lose your flow, right? Where are you, and what do you want this table of contents to also have some sort of like a status, that whether you have understood this concept or not, right? Um, it currently doesn't have an icon, but just imagine that there's an icon on the left or right of it, which will become like a green check mark when you have learned this concept, right? So that you can easily see what all you have already learned. This is one of the big problems. There are so many books, internet material available, but you don't know, it's very hard to follow them, right? Like if I go to the Rust book right now, so the Rust book is awesome, but how do I keep track of what all have I already learned? Where should I start again? And so on, right? If I come back to the Rust book after 2 months, let's say I've already learned chapter 5, chapter 7, 20, whatever, right? And you might not even read sequentially, right? Oftentimes people read in a need to learn basis, right? Like for whatever project I'm doing. So it's very hard for this book to keep track of it. So our vision is that at some point this particular URL will also be a part of the net protocol. It will also be um, powered by the Let's Teach. Right. So obviously, Let's Teach is a protocol. Sorry, Ednet is a protocol. So meaning that you can write your own application, and we'll figure out how do we do all of these linkings and so on. So so anyway, um, so this is like a classroom. This is like a classroom. Classroom almost looks like a book, and but each of those could be like a have a YouTube video embedded. So it doesn't really matter, right? Like what you have, and one of the yeah. So we are teaching blah blah different things. So even the it's like for example, if you have a YouTube video, you will still probably create a page which will embed the YouTube video. Maybe you'll want to put something below or after it because you can't control anything on the YouTube page. And definitely you don't get this kind of table of content and sidebar and the header footer when you are on the YouTube page. So if you are trying to teach something and you want to include the YouTube content, it is best to create a page like this, which will be, which is what we'll see, like using our app that we're building. Embed the YouTube video in it, and yeah, cool. So you have some sense of idea. Okay, what is a classroom? The most interesting is this will have these, and the status would be like self-reported. So for example, I'm the one who is deciding whether I've learned data types or not. So I'll just there will be like a button which will say, I've already mastered or learned data types. In fact, the way when you're self-reporting it, you might even have like a like few different, like you might say, okay, I am kind of like familiar with data type, two I have kind of understood data type properly, two I have kind of mastered data type. Like you kind of like may want to grade yourself. So I mean, if you look at it like Anki is a good example. Anki, the tool, it lets you for each card it tells you how well you know, right? So how well you know data types in Rust, it's self-reporting, right? So maybe data types or RC less well than let's say the print statement hello world, like this you mastered this, right? So it's kind of like a self-reporting. Tomorrow it might even be powered by um, quizzes, so that based on the answer of the quizzes we will do that. And that, by the way, the beautiful thing, if this concept had a URL, like this content is teaching you some concept. So this is a content URL. What you're embedding in your class is a content URL, but somewhere on the side it will say it will link to the concept URL, so you can go to that concept and also look at the dependency and all of that. And on the concept URL, you will not only just find all the content which teaches that concept, but you'll also probably find quizzes for that concept. So we'll probably in the second phase of EdNet protocol, we'll include assessment also, like how are you doing, fine-grained assessment. Okay, so now let's talk about the last concept called X-ray. So the idea is that when you are learning something, you might be learning from all over different sites. Like you might be learning on Coursera, you might be learning on YouTube. The fuck up is key. There's a central place which keeps track of what all have you learned and where have you learned and so on. So how do you answer this question, right? How much do you know Rust? Like I do know Python, I know Rust, but if you ask me how much do I know Rust, I can't really answer that question. I mean, we'll do a very, very long interview for you to answer this question. You might say, oh, I know Rust basics, but maybe within basics also a bunch of things I don't know, right? And I might know a bunch of advanced stuff. And it all depends on what I needed to learn to. The learning is not happening in vacuum. Most of the time, if you're not learning in school and colleges, you don't go, sequentially. You learn on demand, and we are a huge fan of learning on demand because the way you teach in schools is very flawed because students don't know why do I need to learn this concept, right? So the motivation is not there. So if you do not have motivation, there's no learning. That's just fraud. So it is impossible for you to cram all the motivation. So I'm more of a this whole thing is more of a lifelong learning thing. We want to create a the internet was created for creating good things, and we have ended up creating it. It's like a ad selling network and social media hate creating machine. It's like we're trying to solve it. We want to make internet. When people used to talk about internet, they're like, okay, we can all become like master, learn so many things, and we can learn so many things. But unfortunately, the way internet is currently structured right now, that is not really optimally happening, and that's our kind of goal to try to fix that. And yeah, so basically, if you're learning anything from any place, who is the owner of this knowledge, this data, which is key? What all do you know? Currently, if you use what is called Coursera is the owner of that data, right? I mean, you might get lucky, and Coursera lets you download some sort of JSON or XML or some sort of data file, which will tell you what all things you have learned. But it will be, however, badly documented JSON. And what do you do with that JSON, right? You can't just during interview just open the JSON and send that, right? So you need a great UI basically, right? I mean, come on. When was the last time you really did a view source and read the content, right? This the rendered page is what we love, and but we need to have data. So the idea of X-ray is that every learning event. So what is a learning event, right? So let's say if you're on this page, the moment you open this page, this is this is your data. Like the fact that you have ever opened install fastn on Mac slash Linux in your life, this data needs to be owned by you, right? It should be owned by you. And so, but learning will happen all over the web, right? So how do we take this data, which is your browsing activity data, spread across all sorts of websites, all sorts of sites and applications and stuff? How do we make sure that all of that activities that you're doing, like how much time you spend, like for example, we are going to create a bunch of activities, like for example, for this particular concept. And right now, like if you do the web analytics, it will capture the URL. The fuck up is you're not learning, let's say, book slash Mac OS, right? Because that's a content URL. What is the concept you're learning? You're learning probably fastn.com slash some concept. So it kind of it does it you want probably to keep track of you're spending time on a content URL, but what you really want to know your future employer needs to know your future employer doesn't care, or you don't care whether you learned decorators in Python, for example, from an O'Reilly book or a YouTube video, right? You all you need to care is whether you know decorators in Python or not, right? So basically, the idea is that we capture this information and then we send it to your site. So we are currently creating Let's Teach, which will be used to uh, create this page that you see in front. But very soon we'll also have another companion app called Let's Learn, and Let's Learn will be a page owned by you, right? So that would be so every single person should have a Let's Learn instance, right? And both Let's Teach and Let's Learn are open source, protocol based, hopefully well documented protocol based. Um, Everything and so basically fastn.com will create a packet, a JSON or whatever, and send it to, let's say, amityu.com is learning, right? So fastn.com uses Let's Teach, and amityu.com uses Amityu is me, right? Like so I will have a Let's Learn instance on my site, right? And fastn.com would be a Let's Teach um, thing. So, so fastn.com is where I am sitting at. Right. The reality is that I'm not learning everything on sitting on amity.com. So where do I want the information about what all have I learned? I want that information to be present on amity.com. So if someone asks me, hey Amity, what do you know? I should be able to send them to amity.com/xray. Right. So slash xray is the page which contains the information from all over the web as long as they're part of the EdNet protocol. So to be part of EdNet protocol, obviously you have to be EdNet compliant, and the minimum compliance requirement is that whatever activities you are doing on a Let's Teach, on a classroom, basically, all the learning is going to happen inside classroom, right? Within the EdNet, we mentioned a lot of URLs and different concepts. But the learner is going to spend most of their time on a URL like this, on a page like this, which is a classroom. And whatever activity you're doing, so for example, every 10 seconds we will capture that I spent reading this page every 10 seconds. So one read activity will happen, page load activity will happen. And obviously the most interesting activity is when I'm clicking on the button says, okay, I've learned, fastn, how to install fastn on Mac/Linux, right? So the self-reported my this thing. I have learned it, or do I know? So if somebody asks me, do you know how to install fastn on Linux or Mac? What is my answer? Yes or no? So initially my answer would be no. At some point, I'll on this page, I'll say, okay, I learned this, and at that time it will become yes. And whenever I do that, click on that button, right? The information through server to server API from Let's Teach instance to Let's Learn instance will be sent in some sort of JSON format. The purpose of this EdNet protocol website is to actually document those API interactions still very early, and there are some ideas which might totally change by the time we implement it. So, anyways, so now you have this particular thing. So X-ray would be a page, right? Comedy.com/X-ray will be my X-ray. So it's kind of like my mental X-ray. It's like X-ray of my mind, right? It basically simplest way to think about it just simply lists all the concepts that I know that I've chosen to share with you. In fact, actually, all of these things will be authenticated and blah blah. Right? It will know who is opening the X-ray page, and I might not show everything to you and blah blah. So there's going to be good ACL etc. at some point, but initially let's pretend it's all public data that amity.com/X-ray will show you everything Amity knows. Right? So and not only will it teach you, tell you what I know, it also tell you when did I learn it. So all the activity data, right? It will be shown on a timeline. Oh, this Python decorator, when did I learn? If you really ask me when did I learn Python decorator, answer would be probably in 2002, 2003, right? But LinkedIn is not telling you that information. My resume is not telling you that information. But my X-ray will tell you that information. Obviously, I cannot go in the past and uh, pre-populate with the past data. But at least the learning that I do now on Earth, or rather whenever the Let's Teach is there, will be available on the X-ray page. So we are envisaging the data about me will be sent to my website and will be available to anyone who wants to know this question. And once you have this X-ray, some magical things can happen. For example, let's say if you have a JD. Now, so far, if you're trying to hire someone, one of the first thing you do is create some sort of like job description. What all is this person going to need to know to be able to perform that job? And currently, the way we answer that question, what do you need to know, is very vague and human language answer. Like they need to know pattern. But do they need to know decorators? Right? Do they need to know how to use decorator? Do they need to know how to create decorators? Right? The JD doesn't tell you that. So the current state of affair art with the way we create resumes and JDs is pretty flawed, right? They are like absolutely the kind of thing you would have done in, you know, 5000 BC. There's no difference between your resume written on a stone by a carver versus a resume written in Google Docs today, right? It's the same thing. It's not better because of internet. It's just the same words, and not telling you, like for example, if if the resume was a list of, which is basically an X-ray, was a list of concepts that you know, and job description was a list of concepts that you need to know, right? It's a very simple thing to now match you against JD, right? So it can simply look at what all concept you need to know to perform this job, and what all concept you know, and tell you the intersection, and it'll give you a score. Maybe you know 100% of the stuff, maybe you know 20% of the stuff. Currently, you can take your magical AI and you can take whatever you have and take the typical best state of art JD written by the best JD writers, paid by millions of dollars per year salary, uh, people in Google, and the resume written by the smartest Nobel laureate or whatever, and try to answer this question: ki, what is the percentage match between that JD and the resume? And there's no real answer. There's no reliable. Obviously, not every skill. Um, anyways, so that you got the kind of the gist of what we're trying to do. So the X-ray will collect information. Now, how do we make sure that information is not faked? Because the each activity, each event that is happening will be a signed event. So the reader of the whoever download this data on omni.com/X-ray, they will know, okay, this particular, okay, when I said I learned how to install, at least Amity was logged in on fastn.com, right? And this information will be sent to amity.com along with some sort of like a signature, and based on, let's say, fastn.com's public key, right? So fastn.com will have a public key, and through that public key they are signed, okay, amity.com has visited this URL at least once, or whatever the event that has happened. So each of the event has been signed by fastn.com public key, right? Similarly, Rust public key, and so forth. So when you're downloading it, you will know that there is actually a, how do I say, um, certain, obviously this can be gamed. You can obviously write some sort of bot, and that's why we envisage that the classrooms should not be such public classrooms. The real learning will not just happen, it can totally happen here, if you're a self-taught person, but it can also happen in the guidance of some sort of like a teacher, right? So consider schools, and like you can learn anything, but the IT Bombay or any university will not give you a degree unless there's some sort of like a professor who has some sort of teacher who has some sort of like sense. If you try to fake uh, exams, right, that real world will has created. So we are digitizing the process, but we are not eliminating the. Obviously, you can say if for self learners, it will be really. In fact, another way, one way to look at the reliability of X-ray is by looking at the signatures. But let's say if the signatures are not there for whatever reason, um, or you're worried about fraud, right? This person has figured out signatures might be there, but how do I know for sure? Because it's $1 million job. How do we know for sure? So the X-ray is showing you what all concepts you know and how well you know. So you as an interviewer can just randomly pick some concepts, right? And you can see if this guy is a liar or not, right? Because this person is saying they know double decorator or whatever. You sit with them in a coffee shop and you ask them, okay, tell me what the hell is a double or decorator or whatever, right? And based on the answer of that question, you'll know, and you don't even have to spend an hour, right? So if you have X-ray, you can just randomly ask this question, and in fact you can even create a like a very low level person who doesn't know anything about Python, like your HR or recruiter guy can also ask you, hey, I randomly looked at your X-ray and saw that you know decorator. On the spot, I'll ask you, and because you see, decorator is a concept that you've learned, and for the concept is a concept URL, and the concept URL contain quizzes, right? Which is basically a bunch of questions that people can ask you. So the low level recruiting guy can simply be presented with a random questions from the concept that you have mentioned, and it will just, that low level guy who doesn't even know Python probably ask you, okay, what is decorators in Python, and the answer that you give, this quiz can contain these keywords you must use, or this whatever, or maybe show this code and just ask them what will be the output of this code, right? So depending on what kind of is this uh, can you quickly answer this question or not, whether you really know this topic or not, right? So anyways, so I think you've gotten the gist of what we are building. We'll take a pause and we'll record the third video whenever we have kind of next. See you later.